All right, so now that we've set up this blueprint here, let's take a look at how we can add in or take away the collisions and maybe add in some impulses to the ball. Okay, so first of all, let's go into our cube here and let's look for the collision here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to say no collision. Okay, we're going to save that. We're going to hop down here and we're going to play. So what this should do is that this now has this no collision here, okay? And it's just basically adding in these balls. And there's not really anything excited about it. But what's cool about this, though, is that if you really wanted to, you could add in two of these here and look at this, okay? Look at that. So now we can add in a bunch more of these balls here. And then, you can see that since there's no collision with this, that is something that you could do. Now, when you spawn something from a game, you shouldn't just add it from nothing. Okay, so something shouldn't just appear out of midair. They should come out of something. So if we were to actually make this game, you might have two different kinds of spawners here. You might have a mesh that is the spawner that has collisions with it, and then you might have this block here that actually spawns it. And the reason why you would do that is just because sometimes when you're adding things like spawning, etc., you do it just from a game object versus the actual object. So let's say, we were spawning something and it was some kind of temple game, for instance. And this temple game had these pots that these balls spawned out of. Well, the pot itself would have collisions to it, but it would spawn it out of this block here that might be inside the pot. And that way it would look like it's coming out of the pot. But at the end of the day, it is coming out of the block just so that you, as a programmer, can do that. Now, this doesn't always happen, but it's one thing that I like to do personally. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and save it because we haven't saved it in a while. Let's hop back to the ball blueprint here, and let's hop back into the event graph. So what we're going to do is we need to add in an impulse to this ball here, because if you look at the game, they just kind of come out at the bottom here. So what we need to do is maybe add in some kind of random impulse. So in order to do that, let's add in our event begin play, and we're going to say add impulse. Okay, and then we're going to say add impulse sphere. Okay, now what this does is I'm actually going to delete this for a second, just because I want to explain it here. So the target itself, what we want to do is you can do, if we type in self here, you'll notice that the get reference to the self is not there. So what we'll do is we'll drag this over and we'll say get sphere and drag that in here. Now it automatically came out for you, and I understand that, but you have to make sure that it has a target here. Now the impulse here is really what we want to have. Is really what we want. So let's go ahead. Let's just add in an impulse here, and you'll see that the impulse will add in as 20, 20, and 20. Okay, and then let's go ahead and compile this, and then everything works here. And let's go ahead and save it here as well, and let's go ahead and play it. Okay, and you can see here that for the most part, it's pretty much the same here. So let's go ahead and let's hop back into the ball blueprint here. And let's just take, 1, 1, and then let's make the Z 100 or 1,000. Okay, we'll make it something that's really, really big. Okay, and let's hop back down in here. Let's save it and play it here. So, and this ball here. And you can see that this velocity change, we also need to add in one other item, which is this velocity change. So let's go ahead, let's save it, and let's play it. And there you go. That is working up. So you can see that the impulse is being added to the top here. So let's hop back in here. And then let's go ahead and let's change, let's make this 0 here, and let's change this to 1,000. Okay, and save it and run it again. So you can see that what's going to happen here is that it goes to the left here, and that's not what we want here. So what we want to do is we want to kind of add in a random kind of value here. So if you look at this, we're just going to add 0, 0, 0. We're going to take this out here, and we're going to promote this to a variable here. Okay, and we'll call this. We can just call this impulse like this, and let's compile it here, and you'll see that we have this random impulse here. Now what we want is, let's just say it's, well, it's not necessarily a random impulse if we're setting it, but we want it to be random. So let's just say it's 100 here. So what we want to do is we want to set up a random impulse. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to drag this impulse here, we're going to set it. Okay, and then from here we're going to drag this in here, and we're going to drag this, make sure that we're going to have to set this random impulse here first. Okay, and in order to do that, we're going to need to set this impulse to something random. And in order to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to right click and say split struct pin. Okay, so let's kind of move that down here for now. And what we want to do is set up a random impulse number. Okay, so in this, let's go ahead and what we need to do is just essentially now create a random impulse for the. In order to do that, let's go ahead and let's say random float in range. Okay, so in this case, we can go ahead and just say the min, and we're actually going to use -1,000, and let's just say 1,000. Okay, just like that. And let's go ahead, compile it, and save it, and everything works out. Let's just go ahead and let's run it and let's see what happens. So, you can see that we now have all these random, and every time it spawns, all of these are random. So it's basically picking up a number in between those two, which is exactly what we're looking to do. Now the question is, do we want that number? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's create a couple variables. We'll call this, and they're both going to be floats, by the way. So it's going to be float. It's going to be, we'll call this min x random impulse. And I'm going to copy this right away. And I'm going to create another variable. And then we're going to paste that in here. And we're going to say, change this to min to max x random impulse. Okay, let's compile it so that we can actually make those. Okay, so for whatever reason, the new one didn't get created, so that's fine. Let's go back into here. Here, and we'll say it's still copied. So min x and max x. Let's compile everything. And so the max x is now what we can do is we can actually say, it's whatever we want. The max x is going to be 500, and then the min x is going to be, well, -500. Okay, just like that. And then I'm going to get both of these here and just simply plug them in. Okay, so we got, well, we have to plug it into the right one. So we got the max x to the max, and then the min x, and we're getting these, of course. So we're going to so the min to the min, and then there we go. Now these other two we don't need. We could, but we don't necessarily want to. What we could do is we could honestly just do this if we really wanted to. But then again, the names of these variables are not correct. So just be careful what you do with your variables here. Now, of course, we could go and change and take a look at all these here. Let's just go ahead, let's compile everything and save it. And I think everything does look good. So as you can see here, everything will work out. And then we now have some kind of spawning here that puts it either left or right. And actually, while we're at it, it does kind of look like we need something to the right as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of move this up a bit. And we're going to do the exact same thing here. We're just going to take this here. And I'm going to Duplicate this. We're going to say max y, random impulse. And then I'm going to take this one here and I'm going to duplicate it as well. And then this is going to say min y. Okay, so we're literally going to do the exact same thing, but with the y components here. And this is important, and I'll talk about why this is important for rapid prototyping in a second. But let's just go ahead. Let's add in a random float in range. And then we're also going to drag the max y random. We're going to get that, drag it into the max, and then we're going to go to min y, drag that, get min y, drag that in there. We're going to make sure that we compile it, and I'm going to make this negative 200, and then I'm going to make the max just 200. So it won't be as big. So let's compile it and save it, and let's hop back into here, and you can see that, well, everything is going every which way. And I think that's pretty good. And if we really wanted to, we could do that with the z-axis as well. So let's take a look at why this is important and why we do things this way for rapid prototyping. Well, the answer is actually surprisingly simple. The reason is that you want to set up these variables because you don't know what this number is. You don't know what kind of spawning that you're looking for, how it's working, etc. So you want to set it up as a variable. Now, of course, we could have just, added in the min and max ranges like this, but unless you're in a real hurry, I wouldn't recommend doing that because sometimes you might add in more of these variables, and what you can also do is you can see that all of your variables are here. You can just simply change them here, and then everything is set up. I personally like changing the actual variable versus clicking the min and max for each one, but that's just my personal thing here. And if you really wanted to, if we just drag this into the impulse z, and let's save it here, we'll see what happens. And what that will do is it will kind of move up, and it will just kind of give some kind of random number here. Now remember, the z one you might have to make you might have to make something a little bit different just because you're fighting gravity, right? So the other two, you're not necessarily fighting gravity here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that here. And if we really wanted to, we could, if we wanted to put, for example, to move this up, we would put it as like 600. Let's save it. And let's just test that out right there. Okay. So there we go. So it kind of moves up. And I kind of like that a little bit better. Okay. So we don't necessarily have to have a random in here, but essentially that's, what it is. It's just kind of spawning up and down. And if you really wanted to, we could make that a variable. In fact, let's do that. Let's add in one more variable. It's a float here. We'll call this and I generally don't like to start things. We'll call this upward impulse. Okay, upward impulse like that. Okay, let's compile it. Let's change it to 600 because that actually worked out well. And also, by the way, when you, and I'm just going to get this here, hook it in. And by the way, when you're working with variables, you rarely get it right on the first time. So that's also why I added in here. And if you ever go into coding, the reason why you want to put things in variables is if you do go to C++ coding and you do a lot of it, all your variables are at the top. And you can change these variables whenever you want. All right. So that's essentially how you set up the spawner. See you in the next tutorial.